Hello and welcome back to the verbose mode at Spring IO 2025, and this time we're going to turn on the verbose mode with Ivar. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining.
Yes.
And you know what? You are the most provocative person at this conference.
Do you think so?
I'm absolutely sure. Look at your t-shirt, Jakarta EE. Let's rewind a little bit. Jakarta EE used to be Java EE, which came up with the context with the concept called EJB, Enterprise Java Beans. We will have Rod Johnson right here in about half an hour.
Okay, cool.
And Rod Johnson, we know him as the founder, the author of the original Spring framework.
Yes.
Which came to be as a result of a book that was called Java Enterprise Development Without EJB.
Yes.
Spring started as anti-EJB thing.
Yes.
The biggest promise was you don't need EJB, you don't need Java EE, you do Spring instead.
Yes. So this is very interesting discussion, and I wish you had been to my talk yesterday. And you can always look it up on YouTube.
Of course.
And in my talk, I start with a slide that says Spring loves Jakarta EE.
That's provocative.
Yeah, and then I turn it around and say Jakarta EE loves Spring as well. And this dynamic between these frameworks, standards, technologies is very interesting. And as you said in the history, back in the days when J2EE came around in 1999, that was when Java conquered the server, because Java was made for set-top boxes on TVs, but it turned out to be very useful on the server. So they created J2EE to make that more robust. And J2EE was a tremendous success and has conquered the world with Java on the server side. However, it had some technical flaws, and it was a little bit over-engineered. Especially, you mentioned EJBs. You had to create a bunch of interfaces and XML descriptors and this and that to get it to work.
As a Java EE 1.3 certified developer, I have flashbacks and nightmares up until today from this.
And my story continues where then in 2004, when Spring Framework came about, then they removed the necessity of EJBs and replaced it with their counterparts. And you ended up with creating the same business logic, because that was in your class, but you didn't have to do all this verbosity around. But you ended up with a bunch of XML files there as well. So it wasn't easy to debug a Spring application back in the days. If you look at modern EJBs today, for example, it's one annotation. It's no XML descriptors. It's nothing around. It's one class. It's one annotation. So it is very simple. Yes.
And very similar to Spring component in the end of the day.
So this dance where J2EE come up with something, Spring made it better.
Yeah.
Java EE comes back, makes it just as good, maybe even better.
Yeah.
And Spring Boot comes along and changes the game again.
Yeah.
We come up with core profile and smaller runtimes in Jakarta EE. So it's kind of this dance with each other that kind of make technology better.
This is how competition helps in the end of the day for the end user to get better technology.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right. But now with Spring where it is.
Yes.
And different other frameworks like Quarkus and Micronaut that are also competing in the same space and do very similar things on very similar concepts. How Jakarta EE is still competitive, and why did you mention that Spring loves Jakarta EE and Jakarta EE loves Springs? Where this integration is?
So you only have to dial back a year or two when Spring Boot 3 came around.
Okay.
And people were migrating from Spring Boot 2 to Spring Boot 3, and they discovered, oh, I have a bunch of these Java X imports. And they've changed now. It's Jakarta all over it. So then you see how much of your code that actually has Jakarta in it. And Spring Framework, when I have a slide where I show a picture of all the Jakarta specifications, and I color them blue. I just use that because blue is a nice color, no other reason than that. And I paint them green wherever it touches, or Spring Framework touches it. It can use an implementation directly, or it can use some APIs from it, or use some variants of it. And it's about half of the specifications of Jakarta EE platform are directly or indirectly used by Spring through their implementations.
So Spring depends on a lot
Very
of
much.
what Jakarta EE does.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
And especially the implementations of the specifications, because as developers they would see, for example, the Jakarta persistence annotations in their code and the imports from that, but underneath it would be Hibernate that does this stuff, and Hibernate is an implementation of Jakarta persistence. So that is how it usually is. The same thing with Servlet, for example. It is Spring Boot runs on Tomcat or another Servlet engine. And
Right.
that is an implementation of the Servlet spec from Jakarta EE.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, then let me ask you the other way around. If Jakarta EE has everything that Spring depends on, plus more, all those parts that weren't painted green but still remained blue, why do we need Spring today?
So I think we need Spring to they solve a little bit of different issues. Many of them same, and those specifications that we have in Jakarta EE that aren't directly used for Spring, that may be that Spring has counterparts that is completely different, and that's fine, because more technologies, more options prevents us from having a monopoly, and developers. We don't like monopolies.
Oh, no,
we like options, right?
And choices.
So you can choose whatever works for you. And all the same way, I said also Jakarta EE loves Spring, and that is we look at Spring for inspiration as well. So we can say, for example, a new specification we introduced in Jakarta EE 11 is Jakarta Data. And that is more or less a copy of Spring Data, because that is something that has proven very successful.
And done very well.
Yes, so we want to standardize it and also provide it for the Jakarta EE community. And so we learn from each other. So you can say it started with J2EE made the foundation for Java on the server. Spring made it better. Spring depends on Jakarta EE and inspired Jakarta EE to be better as well.
Excellent. Okay, last part of trolling, I promise. Last. It sounds to me like Jakarta EE mostly responds to what Spring does. It was true with the JPs, it's true with now with data and persistency. I think, and I want you to correct me, that it's because Jakarta EE is much more, bureaucratic is not a good word, but procedural than Spring, because it's a community process and it's a community standard.
Yes, so it's a good point that Jakarta is developed at the Eclipse Foundation under the Jakarta specification process, which is very similar to how the JCP used to work. So we have the specification project that creates releases and stuff. And whereas Spring is managed, or it's still open source Spring as well, but it is managed by one company behind it. So they have much more play around and more flexibility how they can form their stuff.
And they can run faster because of that.
Yes, we're more dependent on what the community wants and does and agrees upon, because we're a group of a lot of vendors contributing to this.
And so this agreement process takes obviously time.
It can do in times, yes.
Yeah. And so what you get in the end is something that might be longer to release, but more agreed upon.
Yes, and we are creating standards. It's not a framework like Spring. So, for example, the area of AI that everybody is talking about now, it is a little bit too early to standardize anything about AI because it's moving so fast.
But on the other side, you have Spring AI that works right now.
Yes, and in my talk, I demo how you can use Spring AI in a Jakarta EE application. So it's very easy to integrate Spring components into Jakarta EE. The other way around works as well. But
so you might say, all right, you want a more stable and standardized foundation, And then if you want to experiment with the bleeding edge features, you can always add them from Spring.
Yes, we want to do this code-first approach to specification. So we need to have something that is actually out there that is useful for the community to use before we standardize it. We don't want to create a standard first and then see who uses it, because that was what happened with EJBs in J2EE.
Exactly.
And we don't want to go there again. So we want something that is being used
and
that's proven successful, like Spring Data, like maybe Spring AI will be that in the future, and then we will standardize something when the industry wants it.
That makes perfect sense. Ivar, thank you very much. It was a pleasure.
Thank you for having me.
And for you all, stay tuned for more episodes of Verbose Mode by DuxCare at Spring AI 2025. One is actually coming right up. I also see my next guest is waiting. Thank you very much.